Mm-hmm. So the reason that you want an empty scale ticket is because if a load says it's only supposed to be 10,000 pounds and a driver knows their experience, so when they're driving the truck with the load, they can tell, like, this doesn't seem like it's 10,000 pounds. It seems like it might be like 15 or 20,000 pounds because the transmission on the truck is gonna act a little bit different. Or you can tell that you're using a little bit more fuel, or just different things that could occur. So the reason that you want the empty scale ticket is if that happens, well, the truck is loaded, the truck and trailer are loaded. So you're gonna have to get unloaded to now prove that it is heavier than what they say. So we already start with that empty scale ticket from the beginning. Then when a problem occurs that the load may be heavier, well, all we need is the scale ticket with the truck, trailer, and the load. So that we know if it says it's 40,000 pounds with the empty and it's 57,000 pounds, okay, well that load's 17,000 pounds, not 10, because it should only be 50,000 pounds. So because of that, because we have the one that's when it's empty. So that's just something that we request as a company, but you can do whatever you want. But we suggest it because it's going to be the smart thing to do. Yeah, because a lot of the carriers that you're going to be working with are probably going to be either hot shots or box trucks, and some of them are non-CDL and some of them are CDL. So even though the truck can handle the 12 or 15,000 pounds, they legally can't haul a load if they're non-CDL. Everything has to be 26,000 or below. So that's why those things are going to be very important when you're actually dispatching. So when you're, you know, Caleb has a guy and he can only scale 7,000 pounds on his box truck, which is really odd because most of them, they can scale maybe like 85, 95, maybe 10 if they're non-CDL. But his truck, I don't know why it's heavier or what's going on, but he can only scale 7. And it is. He showed us the empty scale ticket, and his truck's heavier than other people's trucks. So, but he's still able to keep it running, and they're team drivers, so he's able to earn a good amount of money with them. But so the 4 things that you need are the NC authority letter, and that comes from the FMCSA. So that directly to the carrier. The W-9, that's going to have their EIN information. The notice of assignment, that comes from the factoring company. So the factoring company is a third-party company that collects funds for the carrier. So instead of the carrier having to wait 30, 60, 90 days to get paid, the factoring company can pay you sometimes within 1 hour to 48 hours after you've delivered the load, instead of waiting that period. And then you're not held accountable to trying to get that payment in 30 days, because that can be some time. A factoring company also helps different carriers once they've been established. They can even give them a line of credit, because you know tires are expensive. One mishap over the road can make the difference between you staying in business or like you not being able to run. So sometimes some of the carriers are like, hey, I need to get my load before noon and put this through, so that way the factoring company can give me an advance on my fuel or an advance on this load. So then if they don't get that advance, they literally can't run the load because they don't have money for fuel. So it makes a huge difference. So sometimes you'll see some carriers don't have factoring companies. So 70% of carriers are more successful when they have a factoring company versus they don't. So a lot of carriers don't realize they need to have, you know, $50,000, $60,000 worth of either credit or actual funds available in case something were to happen. So then lastly is going to be the COI, which is the certificate of insurance, and that comes from the insurance agent. And so we always request the accord form from the carrier, because that form is going to typically have all of the information that you need in order to get certificates from the insurance company for the carrier. So every carrier, I know Brandon showed y'all these binders, but every one of our carriers, we have a binder for them. And so all of those documents are actually in the binder. So this is gonna be the letter of authority. Then we have their certificate of insurance, their W-9, and then their notice of assignment. So we have the digital copy saved, of course, but sometimes they'll ask like the service date, they'll ask that question so they know how long has this authority actually been in business and how active it is. So the other issue with this, so like KFC, they've been in business since 2020, so they have been in business a little over 3 years, and they haven't had any issues where their MC has lapsed or revoked or anything like that. So they have 3 years of consecutive running, where there are some people who have, they'll show you this letter, but then they've had stuff happen on their MC and they're only 6 months active or 2 months active because they let the insurance lapse or they stopped their business for a little while. So just because this letter they give you is this service date, sometimes we found issues after the fact, just because we're not like, oh, let me go be an investigator and see what's going on under their MC. But typically, like if you have a fleet, you do want to go and do some investigating to see how their MC is doing, and we show you how to be able to look up carriers' histories also. But you know, you'll be dealing with a lot of new carriers, so they're gonna be like, just like, oh, thank you, I need help. Like, so they're just gonna be grateful for you. You're not really gonna be dealing with maybe like 6 or 7 truck type carriers or fleets. If you do, you definitely want, like, and we've been burned a couple of times because we're like, oh yeah, it's a fleet, this and that. So we get them set up, I'm like, oh no, they have a horrible history. So then it's very difficult to get them loaded. So that, yeah, you have 10 trucks, but nobody wants to run a load with you. Like, I've had people like, if you were the last trucking company on the earth, I wouldn't use you. Like, not our company, but another carrier, not this one either. But so it's our job as dispatchers to also protect their MC. So if a driver isn't showing up on time, is being crazy and disrespectful, then we need to tell the owner, hey, your guy is gonna ruin your MC. And they're like, what? Because they're not dealing with them on the daily. Most of the owners are kind of removed from the daily processes of dealing with the drivers. So, or you can have amazing drivers like, hey, this driver, you need to, like, if he knows friends, if they're like him, you need to get another one just like him. So it can make and break your business.
With that, I remember I was telling the owner, like, this driver is just not the one. And he was like, I don't care about the MC. He was like, I'll just go make another one.
Yeah, there are some carriers like that. So then, but that's where you have to have the honest conversation with them and say like, okay, that's fine. You want to keep your driver and he can mouth off and do all of those things. It's going to be very difficult for me to do my job as a dispatcher, because once carriers have bad reputations, it doesn't matter how many MCs you get, the industry is only getting worse when you start a new MC. So you start a new MC, they don't want to work with people who have an MC for 30 days or 2 months, and you have bad attitudes everywhere. Because brokers have this thing called carrier 411. So like they'll look up your MC because that's how they basically know that this MC number. That's how they'll look at this company. It'll bring up all the information on this carrier.
30 minutes?
And then
okay, thank you.
They'll say, oh, well, I have 4 brokers on here that say you're horrible, you don't communicate, your driver curses people out. So they'll tell, you know, in the system, and it snitches on one another. So then that's where that goes into, that carrier's probably not ideal. So just because you start with a carrier doesn't mean you're going to keep them forever. I mean, the most ideal thing is, yes, you want to keep them as long as possible. And this carrier is actually our longest carrier that we have running so far. They're 2 flatbeds, and I mean, I don't have any issues with them. Super respectful, like, yes ma'am, no ma'am. They'll be cursing on the phone, but they're normally like, hey, like if something's like, hey, back up, because the forklift driver or something, but they never go and get in a fight. Then I had another carrier, I mean, they're like, please never send this person here ever again, because he was like climbing in the facility and like doing all these things because he wanted to get loaded, and like, you have to wait. So they make remarks with one another, so you definitely, you can guide them, but you can't make them do whatever they want. You know, they're gonna do whatever they want at the end of the day. But our job is to try to protect the MC, but if they don't wanna protect it, I'd be like, well, I don't wanna do work with you because this is gonna be problematic. So the one thing you'll never get back is your time. So if you're giving people time and you're not making any money for all of that, at the end of the week, the work should produce something for both of y'all, not just, well, I was here dispatching, because sometimes I know the carrier sometimes think like, well, you're just sitting in front of the computer, not doing anything. And like, I could also say, well, you're just sitting behind the wheel, just pushing the truck. Like, so everybody can go back and forth, but we just have to respect one another, basically, and your craft is your craft. I'm not gonna tell someone, hey, I know how to secure down that fork. I don't know how to do none of that. I can tell you it's gonna fit or it's not, and I can tell you it's too heavy. I can do all of those things, but I'm never gonna say, like, you need to pick up this load and you need to, no, because we have our own trucks, and if an accident happens because I said, oh, I didn't care that he said it's not a good load, pick it up, and no, because then now we're dealing with an insurance claim, and there are a lot of things. So
let me chime in on that. So that's one thing that they always say is no load is worth your life or insurance claim.
Because even though they say like, oh, that's why I have insurance, you don't want to deal with that. You still have to, you know, pay your part, and it's going to cost you more in the long run if you get a loss on your insurance than it is if, man, I would have just sat the whole weekend and then been able to just run on Monday if I just, because sometimes, yeah, you pick up a load, or you're there to pick up a load on a Friday, and, you know, it just didn't work out, so then the driver's sitting all weekend. But you're not making any money, but you're definitely not losing any money, because we've had that situation before, so. So we're gonna go into how the documents look. So the letter, so this is a sample of what the FMCSA certificate looks like, and you have a copy in your folder as well. So like I said earlier, this service date is gonna be really important because it's gonna tell you the age of the authority. So right now, with the industry changing the way that it's been, a lot of brokers have different requirements to get set up with them. Some want 6 months of authority, some want a year, some want you to have an inspection, some people want you to have 10 units. So then it's just like, well, I've been running 3 years, but I only have the one truck, you know, so then they won't let us book a load with them. So then again, the same thing on the background with the carrier 411, if they have a bad, they say anything bad against it, then they'll say like, oh, you have a bad reputation, so you just wanna make sure that you take care of that. But this service date, if they do have a revocation or anything like that, it's gonna change, and the letter looks different when that happens. If you do get reinstated, there's a reinstatement letter, but so if you get this and it doesn't look exactly like this, you'll move on to ask them like, I need this letter, because this is what the brokers are gonna want. So it's gonna have their MC, and then the USD number, USDOT number, and then it'll have their company name. So that's basically it for that. So then the other thing is gonna be the certificate of insurance. This one has a little bit more on here that you'll need. this right here, this insured is typically gonna be the carrier's information. So that's always gonna be super important to make sure that they have the proper name and address on there. And so then this area right here is gonna have all of the contact information for that insurance company. It'll have the contact person, sometimes it'll just say agent, but it normally has a person's name on there. It'll have their phone number, the fax, their email address. So what I do, once they send me this over, then I call these people, I call the insurance company and I verify, hey, okay, that number did work. I'm like, okay, I call them. I'm like, hey, I just wanna make sure, can I request a certificate of insurance? And they're gonna either say, oh yeah, you need to email lspiker@campbellrisk.com. Or they might say, oh, you need to email certificates at this, or you just have to call us every time. So then you're gonna figure out how it is that you're gonna get that certificate of insurance every time. And you'll just wanna verify that fax number as well, because it's another thing that they ask for when you're filling out the packets. So then, depending on what the coverage is of the actual policy, then there's gonna be different boxes filled. So like box trucks, a lot of people, or a lot of carriers like to get set up with Amazon Relay. Amazon Relay used to take on new carriers, now it's 6 months before they can start working with them. But they require this commercial general liability. So then they'll have all these things here, give you different information. So this policy number is what you're gonna need. And then you'll also need the, when it's effective and when it expires. And then it'll also tell you the amount of coverages. So the ones that are required for trucking industry is gonna be the automobile liability, which is gonna be here, and it'll be $1 million policy. And then the cargo insurance, it typically goes in this blank spot right here. So it'll say cargo, and then the minimum is gonna be $100,000 for carriers. So the difference between what the FMCSA requires versus what the brokers require, it only takes $750,000 to become active with the FMCSA. But to work with 99% of brokers, you need to have the $1 million policy. So you may come across a carrier who sends everything over and you're like, oh man, I got all their documents, but you have to read through everything, because we've had people send over stuff and it was $750,000, not $1 million. And we're like, hey, so we gotta talk about your coverages. And they're gonna be like, what's going on? Like, everything's good on it. It's like, well, we need you to invest a little bit more money because we're not gonna be able to book any freight for you. Not, well, we might be able, no, we will not be able to book any freight. No freight.
Use absolutes.
Yeah, because if you use the gray, they're like, well, you said maybe we could get a loan. No, I said we will not be able to book any freight, because they like to like, well, you said this because I'm more like, oh, positive. So then I have had to deal with, no, on this day, I know your authority became active 2 days ago, but it doesn't have enough money, so we need to invest a little bit more. And just because I've dealt with the insurance purpose of it, it's only like, it might be like, at the most, it could be $100 a month added to their coverage, but that $100 is gonna make a difference between you getting thousands of dollars in a month or no money in a month.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you just have to be smart about how you use your words, because if you tell someone they need to spend more money and they've already spent $10,000, they can be like, I already spent $10,000. So it's like, I feel your pain, but someone gave you some misinformation, and I'm just trying to help you get that truck rolling so we can all help each other make money. Does Yeah, but when you think I've spent 10,000 and another 100, it can make or break someone when you come into the industry and you don't have that sound information that says I should have had another $50,000 in the bank just in case something dumb happened, so I wouldn't have to worry about $100. You know. So then, typically this area right here, this description of operations, it normally may have the trailer, the truck, the VIN number of all of the vehicles there. So some insurance or some brokers, they want to see the actual truck's information on there to make sure that it has coverage. Because unfortunately there are some people who say, oh, I have 4 trucks, and not all 4 trucks are listed on the policy. So then the certificate holder or evidence of insurance, typically the broker wants to be named as the certificate holder. So you would just say, you know, like if a carrier wanted our information, well then I would say B Logistics and then send everything over, because we also do have insurance, just because the overhead that we have here and then some of the vehicles that we have. But so you just have to, just depending on what the insurance agent tells you, you may have to email it, you may have to call them, you might even have a system where you can log in and produce your own certificates. We have that on our insurance. So just depending, and then an insurance agent can make your life easy or they can make your life difficult. We've had both. Now we have the easy, not the difficult. Any questions on this? No? Yes, no? Maybe once we start filling out the packets, then we'll.
Yeah, then you're gonna be like, wait a minute, start over. Be like, no.
So then the W9, I don't have an example up there, but I'll pass around some of the binders so that way y'all can take a look at it.
71 applicants. A lot of calling to do. 71 carriers for them to call tomorrow. 71. Who gonna get a carrier? Who gonna get a carrier tomorrow? Oh, look at the raising hand. Oh, okay, look at that. Confident. I like that. Confident. Exactly. Ooh, I like that. I have no choice. I like that.
We sent another email out this morning and already.
It's like,
when I looked just a little bit.
yeah, it says 71 in like an hour and a half. Yeah, 71 leads.
So then this is the W-9. So on this one, line 1, it's gonna have their company name. So a lot of times people don't know how to fill this out, and it's not because they did something wrong. It's just, I didn't know how to fill it out when we were doing stuff. I'm like, I had to look it up because I did not know. And you don't know what you don't know. So basically, line 1's gonna have the company name, unless you have a DBA. So then it may be like Erica Cruz, DBA, KSG, Movers. But usually it's gonna be just a company name. So line 2 is where they show a doing business as. So some trucking companies do have a DBA, but not all of them. But you do have to fill out line 1 and line 2 on most of these packets, even though it says only if you have a DBA. But if you don't have a DBA, line 1 and line 2 are identical. Doing business as. So, but trucking companies have to have an LLC because they have insurance that is required.
Yeah, I got
So
that y'all
either
go. I
sole
got a call on
proprietor
my
or
calendar.
LLC, single member
I have a
LLC.
call. 3
But
minutes.
then you can do a doing
Gotta
business
use my
as
phone.
well. So sometimes, let's say you have a big LLC and then you have multiple companies under that LLC. So then you have doing business as. But typically, a trucking company normally will only have one. So it's either filed or not. normally filed at the same time.
Talk to y'all later. Maybe I'll come back
You don't have to
after lunch when they book freight.
LLC and transport. They have to be different.
Yeah, but it's the, what makes it different is the way that you filed it, whether it was filed with the Secretary of State or it was filed at your county courthouse.
I know Manny back there. I said, yes, ma'am, it's Ivy. You gotta do this little call real quick. We'll come back and when they're booking freight, I'll come
number
back.
3 on here.
So we can watch them book freight, or they gonna try.
Tax
Talk to y'all a little bit.
So
DM questions.
Single member LLC, sole proprietorship,